They actually tried to condemn my family's century-old mountain cabin as illegally occupied public land. Can you believe that? Karen Whitfield, our HOA president, stood on my front porch with a fake condemnation notice, demanding I vacate within 72 hours. What she didn't know was that my grandfather wasn't just some old mountain man who built this place with his bare hands back in 1924. He was a federal land surveyor who knew exactly what he was doing when he chose this spot. Tell me where you're watching from. And has anything like this happened in your city or state? Because what I'm about to tell you will make your blood boil. My name's Jake Morrison, and I'm a 34-year-old wildlife photographer. After my divorce last year, I moved up to my family's cabin in Pine Ridge, Colorado, a small mountain community about 2 hours west of Denver. The cabin sits on 43 acres of pristine wilderness that's been in my family for 4 generations. My great-grandfather built the original structure, my grandfather expanded it, my father modernized it, and now it was mine. The property is everything to me. It's where I learned to hunt with my dad, where I proposed to my ex-wife Sarah on the back deck overlooking the valley, and where I scattered my grandfather's ashes 3 years ago. Every morning, I wake up to elk grazing in my meadow and the sound of Clear Creek running through my property. It's not just a house, it's my sanctuary. I work remotely, selling my wildlife photography to magazines and running online workshops. The isolation is perfect for my work, and the internet connection my father installed in 2019 keeps me connected to the outside world. Life was finally peaceful after the chaos of my divorce. That peace lasted exactly 4 months. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. I was editing photos of a mountain lion I'd captured the week before when I heard vehicles coming up my private road. Through my window, I saw a white Mercedes SUV followed by a black Tahoe. Out stepped Karen Whitfield, a woman in her late 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of designer hiking outfit that screamed, "I've never actually hiked anywhere." She was flanked by 2 guys in cheap suits who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Karen marched up to my door like she owned the place and knocked with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her entire privileged life. "Mr. Morrison," she announced when I opened the door, "I'm Karen Whitfield, president of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. We need to discuss your illegal occupation of this property." I blinked. "Excuse me." She thrust a manila envelope at me. "This is a formal notice of condemnation. Our recent survey has determined that your so-called family property is actually located on designated public conservation land. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises." I opened the envelope and found what looked like an official document, complete with seals and signatures. The header read, "Colorado Department of Natural Resources, Emergency Condemnation Notice." It claimed my property was illegally built on state conservation land and must be surrendered immediately for environmental protection and public access. "Lady, I think there's been a mistake," I said, keeping my voice calm despite the adrenaline starting to pump through my veins. "My family has owned this land since 1924. I have the deed, the tax records, everything." Karen's smile was colder than a Colorado winter. "Oh, Mr. Morrison, I'm afraid your family has been mistaken for quite some time. You see, when the Pine Ridge HOA was established 5 years ago, we conducted a comprehensive land survey. This entire area was originally designated as public conservation land, but somehow your grandfather managed to file fraudulent homestead claims." One of the suit guys stepped forward. "Sir, I'm Brad Kowalski from Mountain Land Management. We're here to ensure a peaceful transition. The state has already identified this property as a priority acquisition for the new Pine Ridge Public Nature Preserve." I looked at the document again. Something felt off about it, but I couldn't put my finger on what. The seals looked official, the letterhead seemed legitimate, and there were signatures from people with impressive titles. "I need time to review this with my attorney," I said. Karen's expression hardened. "Mr. Morrison, this isn't a negotiation. This is a lawful order from the state of Colorado. Failure to comply will result in forcible removal and criminal charges for trespassing on public land." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Jake, welcome to Pine Ridge. I do hope you'll find somewhere more appropriate to live." As their vehicles disappeared down my road, I stood holding that document, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. In 34 years, no one had ever questioned my family's ownership of this land. Now some HOA Karen was trying to steal it with what looked like official paperwork. I had no idea this was just the beginning. So Karen Whitfield just served me with what looked like an official condemnation notice, claiming my century-old family cabin was built on public conservation land. But here's what happened next that made me realize this wasn't just some paperwork mix-up. This was a calculated attack. And when I started digging into those official documents, I found something that made my blood run cold. That night, I spread everything out on my kitchen table. The condemnation notice, my family's deed from 1924, tax records going back decades, and my grandfather's old surveying equipment I'd kept in the attic. I called my buddy Marcus, who's a real estate attorney in Denver. "Jake, this doesn't look right," Marcus said after I emailed him photos of the documents. The Colorado Department of Natural Resources doesn't issue condemnation notices like this. They go through a completely different process that takes months, sometimes years. So it's fake. I'm not saying that yet, but the formatting is wrong, and I've never seen this emergency condemnation classification before. Give me until tomorrow to make some calls. I barely slept that night. I kept thinking about what Karen had said when the Pine Ridge HOA was established 5 years ago. My grandfather had died 3 years ago, which meant he was still alive when this HOA started. Why hadn't he mentioned anything about property disputes? The next morning, I drove into Pine Ridge proper, a small town that had exploded with wealthy Denver transplants over the past decade. The old mining town charm was still there, but now it was surrounded by million-dollar mountain retreats and artisanal coffee shops. I started at the county clerk's office, where Betty Hutchins, a woman who'd worked there for 30 years, pulled up my property records. "Oh, honey," she said, shaking her head as she scrolled through her computer. "Someone's been busy with your file." "What do you mean?" "Well, your deed is still valid. That hasn't changed. But look at this." She turned her screen toward me. 3 separate survey requests in the past 6 months, all filed by something called Mountain Land Management. That was the company Brad Kowalski claimed to represent. What kind of surveys? Boundary disputes, environmental impact assessments, and... She paused, frowning. "This is weird. They requested copies of all historical surveys for your property, specifically anything done by..." She squinted at the screen. "By William Morrison, my grandfather." "Betty, is there any record of my property ever being designated as conservation land?" She spent 20 minutes searching. "Honey, there's no record of any conservation designation for your property. Never has been. But here's what's really strange. Someone tried to file a claim last month suggesting your grandfather's original survey was fraudulent." My hands clenched into fists. "Who filed it?" "It's listed under Mountain Land Management, but the signature..." She pulled up the document. "Karen Whitfield, as an authorized representative." I drove home with my mind racing, but I wasn't prepared for what I found waiting for me. A bright yellow sign had been planted at the end of my driveway. "Future site of Pine Ridge Public Nature Preserve. Coming spring 2026. My phone was buzzing with notifications. Someone had tagged me in multiple Facebook posts. I opened the Pine Ridge Community Facebook group to find Karen had posted a long message with photos of my cabin. "Neighbors, I'm heartbroken to share that we've discovered a serious case of fraudulent land occupation in our community. The property shown in these photos was illegally claimed in the 1920s through falsified homestead documents. The current occupant, Jake Morrison, is refusing to cooperate with state officials to return this beautiful land to public use. As your HOA president, I've been working with the Colorado Department of Natural Resources to establish the Pine Ridge Public Nature Preserve. This 43-acre parcel will provide hiking trails, wildlife viewing areas, and educational opportunities for our children. But Mr. Morrison is fighting this through expensive lawyers, trying to keep our public land for his private use. I'm asking our community to stand together. This isn't about one man's property rights. This is about preserving Colorado's natural heritage for future generations." The post had 67 comments, and they were brutal. Typical out-of-state transplant thinking he can steal our land. My tax dollars shouldn't go to fighting some guy who won't follow the law. Karen, thank you for protecting our environment from these greedy developers. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Karen had somehow convinced the entire community that I was the villain in this story. And the scariest part? She was doing it with documents that looked completely legitimate. But then I noticed something in one of the photos Karen had posted. It showed the official condemnation notice, but the image was clear enough that I could read the fine print. There, at the bottom, was a reference number, CNR 2024-0847-PR. I called Marcus immediately. Can you run a reference number through the state system? Sure, what VE you got? I gave him the number from Karen's photo. 5 minutes later, he called back. Jake, that reference number doesn't exist in any Colorado state database. But here's the interesting part. The format matches internal HOA documentation systems, not government paperwork. So it's definitely fake? It's looking that way. But Jake, there's something else. I made some calls today about Mountain Land Management. The company was incorporated 6 months ago by, he paused, by Robert Whitfield. Whitfield, as in, Karen's husband. And get this, he's a retired land developer from California. They moved to Pine Ridge 2 years ago and bought one of those new luxury developments on the south side of town. My mind was racing. Marcus, what if this isn't about conservation at all? What if they want my land for something else? That's exactly what I'm thinking. Jake, I need you to be very careful. If they're willing to forge government documents, there's no telling what else they might do. That evening, I was reviewing my grandfather's old surveying notes when I heard vehicles again. This time, it wasn't just Karen. 3 HOA board members stood on my porch, along with Brad Kowalski and someone I didn't recognize, a heavy-set man in a sheriff's uniform. Mr. Morrison, Karen said, her voice dripping with fake concern. I see you haven't begun packing. This is Deputy Martinez from Jefferson County. He's here to explain the legal consequences of ignoring a state condemnation order. Deputy Martinez looked uncomfortable. Sir, I'm just here to serve you with this notice to appear in court next week. You're being sued by the Pine Ridge HOA for unlawful occupation of community property. I took the court summons, my hands shaking with rage. Deputy, have you verified that the original condemnation notice is legitimate? That's not my job, sir. I just serve papers. Karen smiled triumphantly. Jake, this could all go away if you just cooperate. The HOA is prepared to offer you fair market value for your improvements to the land. We're not unreasonable people. What's fair market value for a century of family history? Sentiment doesn't determine property values, Mr. Morrison. But fighting this in court will cost you everything you have, and you'll lose anyway. The state has already made its decision. After they left, I sat on my porch looking out at the land my great-grandfather had cleared with his own hands. For generations of my family had called this place home. I wasn't about to let some corrupt HOA Karen steal it with fake paperwork. But I was starting to realize I was in way over my head. So I'd just been served with a lawsuit by Karen Whitfield's HOA, claiming I was illegally occupying community property. But when I started examining my grandfather's old surveying equipment that night, I found something hidden inside his transit case that made me realize why Karen wanted my land so desperately. And it wasn't for any nature preserve. I couldn't sleep after being served, so I went up to the attic and pulled down my grandfather's old surveying gear. William Morrison had been meticulous about everything. His tools were still in perfect condition, wrapped in oiled cloth inside a heavy wooden case. As I was cleaning his old Transit, I noticed the felt lining in the case was loose in one corner. When I peeled it back, I found a manila envelope wedged between the wood and the padding. Inside were photographs, correspondence, and what looked like geological survey maps from the 1980s. The photos showed my property, but also the surrounding area, including what was now the expensive Pine Ridge development where Karen lived. But in these photos from 40 years ago, that area was marked with bright orange spray paint and survey stakes. One letter was from Colorado Geological Survey, dated 1987, addressed to my grandfather. Mr. Morrison, our preliminary assessment confirms significant mineral deposits beneath the Pine Ridge area, including your property and the adjacent Morrison Creek watershed. Estimated value of rare earth elements and lithium deposits could exceed $50 million per acre. We recommend keeping this information confidential until full survey is complete. My hands were shaking as I read the next document, a handwritten note from my grandfather. County assessor called today asking about mineral rights. Told him nothing. If word gets out about the lithium, they'll find a way to take the land. Better to keep quiet and let Jake decide when he's older. The family cabin matters more than money. I called Marcus at 6 a.m., not caring that it was early. Jake, slow down. Lithium deposits? Are you sure? I'm looking at geological survey maps right now. Marcus, what if this isn't about HOA power trips? What if Karen and her husband know about the minerals? That would explain a lot. Let me make some calls. In the meantime, don't tell anyone about what you found. 2 hours later, Marcus called back. Jake, you need to sit down. I did some research on Robert Whitfield, Karen's husband. He's not just a retired land developer. He's a consultant for rare earth mining operations. His company in California specialized in acquiring mineral-rich properties through creative legal strategies. You mean fraud? I mean they were very good at finding legal loopholes to acquire valuable land cheaply. And get this, Mountain Land Management isn't just owned by Robert Whitfield. The other partners are a mining consortium based in Nevada. I felt sick. So the nature preserve story is complete bullshit. Jake, if your grandfather's geological reports are accurate, your property could be worth hundreds of millions. That's why they're pushing so hard with the fake condemnation orders. They need you off the land before you realize what you're sitting on. That afternoon, I decided to do some surveillance of my own. I drove to the Pine Ridge development and parked where I could see Karen's house, a massive log mansion that probably cost more than most people make in a lifetime. Around 2 p.m., I watched a black SUV with Nevada plates pull into her driveway. 3 men in business suits got out, along with Robert Whitfield, a tall, thin man with silver hair and the kind of smile that probably cost him a fortune in dental work. I was too far away to hear their conversation, but I could see them looking at maps spread across Karen's dining room table through her floor-to-ceiling windows. One of the men kept pointing in the direction of my property. Then Karen made a crucial mistake. She walked outside to take a phone call, and she was close enough to the road that I could hear her side of the conversation. No, the Morrison situation is under control. The court date is next week, and our judge owes us a favor from the Riverside project. Once we get the emergency seizure order, we can have him out in 48 hours. The geological team can start drilling by the end of the month. She paused, listening. The old man never filed the mineral rights separately, so they transfer with the property seizure. Yes, I know it's worth more than we initially thought. That's why we can't let this drag out. I had heard enough. I started my truck and drove home, my mind racing with plans. That evening, I called my cousin Sarah in Denver. She's an investigative journalist for the Denver Post, and I figured it was time to get some media attention on this story. Jake, this sounds incredible, but I need proof before I can publish anything, Sarah said after I explained the situation. I have the geological surveys, the fake government documents, photos of everything. That's a start, but I need more. Can you get evidence of their real plans? Something that directly contradicts their public statements about conservation. I thought about Karen's phone call. What if I could get them on record admitting it's about mining? That would be huge. But Jake, be careful. If they're willing to forge government documents and bribe judges, they might be dangerous in other ways too. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I bought a small digital recorder and practiced using my phone's recording app. I also did something my grandfather had taught me years ago. I hiked the entire boundary of my property and took GPS coordinates at every corner marker. If they were going to challenge my survey, I wanted perfect documentation. On Thursday morning, I called Karen directly. Karen, this is Jake Morrison. I want to discuss your offer. There was a pause. I'm glad you're being reasonable, Jake. Are you ready to accept our terms? I want to meet in person, but I have some questions about the nature preserve plans. Of course. Can you come to my office at the community center this afternoon? Say 2 p.m. I'll be there. The Pine Ridge Community Center was a gleaming new building that looked more like a corporate headquarters than a neighborhood clubhouse. Karen's office was a conference room with a view of the mountains and a perfect view of my property in the distance. Karen was there with Brad Kowalski and another man she introduced as Tom Chun, our environmental consultant. Jake, I'm so pleased you're ready to be part of the solution, Karen began, sliding a folder across the table. This is our final offer, $150,000 for your property, plus we'll cover all your moving expenses. I pretended to study the documents while my phone recorded in my pocket. This seems low for 43 acres of prime mountain property. Well, it's not really prime property, is it? Tom Chin interjected. It's going to be public conservation land. There are restrictions on what can be done with it. What kind of restrictions? Karen jumped in quickly. Nothing that affects the purchase price. The important thing is preserving the natural habitat for future generations. I leaned back in my chair. Karen, I've been thinking about what you said regarding the environmental value of the land. Have you done any geological surveys? The three of them exchanged glances. Why would we need geological surveys for a nature preserve? Karen asked. Oh, I don't know. My grandfather always said this area had interesting mineral deposits. I'd hate for the state to miss out on anything valuable when they take over the land. Brad Kowalski shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Morrison, the focus is on wildlife preservation, not other uses. Right, of course. I smiled innocently. So there definitely won't be any mining or resource extraction on the preserve? Absolutely not, Karen said firmly. That would completely contradict our conservation mission. I stood up to leave, but then turned back as if I'd just thought of something. You know, Karen, I'm curious about something. My neighbor mentioned seeing some men with Nevada plates at your house. Are they part of the conservation project too? Karen's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, it was probably nothing. Just seemed odd that they were looking at maps and pointing toward my property, almost like they were planning something. Tom Chin stood up abruptly. Mr. Morrison, I think we're done here. You have our offer. Take some time to think about it. But Karen held up her hand. Actually, Jake, since you seem to have concerns about the project, maybe I should be more transparent with you. I sat back down, my heart pounding. The truth is, the nature preserve is just the first phase of a larger development project. Once we establish the preserve and demonstrate proper environmental stewardship, we may be able to develop certain areas for ecotourism, sustainable mining operations, educational facilities, that sort of thing. Sustainable mining? Small-scale operations that won't harm the environment. There may be some mineral deposits in the area that could fund the preserve's maintenance. It's all very environmentally responsible. Brad was staring at Karen like she'd lost her mind, but she kept talking. The point is, Jake, you can be part of this vision. We're not trying to cheat you. We're offering you a chance to contribute to something bigger than one family's cabin. I nodded thoughtfully. What kind of minerals are we talking about? Karen glanced at Tom, who shook his head almost imperceptibly. But she was committed now. Lithium, primarily, and some rare earth elements. Nothing that requires major excavation, just targeted extraction. I had her. So Karen had just admitted on recording that this was never about conservation. It was about mining lithium deposits worth potentially hundreds of millions. She'd walked right into my trap, but I was about to learn that cornering a desperate criminal is more dangerous than I thought. Drop a comment if you've ever had to outsmart someone who underestimated you, because Karen was about to realize she'd picked the wrong target. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording app, making sure they could all see what I was doing. Thank you, Karen. That was very enlightening. The color drained from her face. Jake, what are you? I'm documenting the truth. See, I found my grandfather's geological surveys from 1987. I know exactly what's under my land, and I know what you're really after. Tom Chin was already moving toward the door. This meeting is over. Actually, Tom, if that's even your real name, this meeting is just getting started. I pulled out copies of the fake government documents. I also know these condemnation orders are forgeries. Pretty good ones, but my lawyers spotted the inconsistencies. Karen's composure finally cracked. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Jake. This is bigger than your little family cabin. You're right. It's about a criminal conspiracy to steal private property through fraud. And now I have you on record admitting to it. Brad Kowalski, who'd been silent through most of the meeting, suddenly spoke up. Karen, shut up. Now. But Karen was beyond listening to reason. You think you're so smart, Jake? You think your grandfather was some kind of saint? He knew about the mineral deposits for decades and never told anyone. He could have made this community wealthy, but instead he hoarded the information like a selfish old man. He protected his family's land. That's what grandfathers do. Your family doesn't deserve that land. Karen's voice was rising. We've invested everything in this project. We have partners who expect results. You can't just waltz in here and destroy years of planning because you're sentimental about some old cabin. Watch me. I stood to leave, but Brad blocked my path to the door. I don't think so, Jake. You're not walking out of here with that recording. Brad, get out of my way. Give me the phone. I looked around the room. Karen was staring at me with pure hatred. Tom was on his phone speaking in hushed tones, and Brad was positioning himself between me and the exit. This had gone from a legal dispute to something much more serious. You know what's funny? I said, backing toward the windows. I actually considered your original offer. $150,000 would have solved a lot of problems for me. But you got greedy. You couldn't just buy my land honestly. You had to try to steal it. The offer's off the table now, Karen said. We'll take the land through the court order, and you'll get nothing. With a forged document? Good luck with that. Tom finished his phone call and looked at Karen. We have a problem. He's not the only one who knows. My blood went cold. What do you mean? Your cousin Sarah from the Denver Post has been asking questions about mountain land management. Our Nevada partners are concerned. I realized I'd put Sarah in danger by involving her. If anything happens to her, nothing will happen to anyone if you cooperate, Karen interrupted. Give us the phone, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and take $50,000 to disappear. Everyone wins. Except the people you're planning to defraud. Jake, be smart. You're one person against a multi-million-dollar operation. We have lawyers, we have judges, we have resources you can't imagine. You cannot win this fight. I thought about my grandfather, about all the times he'd told me that Morrison men don't back down from bullies. Maybe not, but I can make it expensive for you. That's when Brad made his move. He lunged for my phone, but I was ready for him. I'd spent my whole life hiking these mountains. I was in better shape than some HOA enforcer who probably hadn't run a mile since high school. I dodged left, threw my shoulder into him, and sent him stumbling into Karen's conference table. Then I sprinted for the door. I made it to my truck, but Tom's car was already blocking the parking lot exit. I threw the truck in reverse and backed across the landscaping, my tires tearing up Karen's precious community center lawn. In my rearview mirror, I could see Karen screaming at Brad and Tom, gesturing wildly toward my truck. Tom was back on his phone, probably calling for backup. I knew these mountain roads better than they did, but I also knew they had more resources. I needed to get somewhere safe and figure out my next move. I drove to the sheriff's station in town, but when I got there, I saw a familiar car in the parking lot, the same black SUV with Nevada plates that I'd seen at Karen's house. Through the window, I could see one of the men in suits talking to Deputy Morrison, no relation, unfortunately. This was worse than I thought. If they had law enforcement connections, walking into the sheriff's station could be a trap. Instead, I drove to the one place I knew they couldn't follow me easily, the old mining road that led up to my property from the backside. It was barely more than a hiking trail, but my truck could handle it, and it would give me time to think. I parked behind my cabin and called Marcus immediately. Jake, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for an hour. I'm at the cabin. Marcus, they know I have evidence. And I think they have people in the sheriff's department. Slow down. Tell me what happened. I explained the confrontation at the community center, the recording I'd made, and the chase. Marcus listened without interrupting. Jake, you need to get out of there. If they're willing to use physical intimidation, your cabin isn't safe. I'm not running. This is my land. Your grandfather's land won't matter if you're dead. These people have too much money at stake to let you expose them. Then what do you suggest? We go public. Immediately. Send me that recording and copies of all the documents. I'll contact the FBI and the State Attorney General's office. We'll also send everything to your cousin Sarah and every other journalist we can find. What about the court hearing tomorrow? We'll be there, but with backup. I'm calling in favors from every lawyer I know. If they want to fight, we'll give them one. As we were talking, I heard vehicles approaching on the main road. I looked out my window and saw 3 cars turning into my driveway. The black SUV, Karen's white Mercedes, and a sheriff's department cruiser. Marcus, they're here. Don't answer the door. Don't engage with them. Just record everything. I watched from my bedroom window as Karen, Tom, Brad, and Deputy Morrison approached my front door. The men from the SUV stayed by their vehicle, but I could see they were armed. The knock came hard and official. Jake Morrison, this is Deputy Morrison with the sheriff's department. We need to speak with you. I didn't answer, but I started recording with my phone. Mr. Morrison, we have reports of erratic behavior and threats made against members of the Pine Ridge community. Please open the door. Karen's voice was next, artificially sweet. Jake, honey, we just want to talk. There's been a misunderstanding. I texted Marcus, sheriff's deputy here with Karen. They're claiming I made threats. His response came immediately. Do not open the door. Recording everything. Help is coming. The knocking got more insistent. Mr. Morrison, if you don't open this door, we'll be forced to enter for a welfare check. That's when I made a decision that probably saved my life. Instead of staying hidden, I opened my bedroom window and climbed out onto the roof. My cabin was built into the hillside, so the back roof was only about 6 feet off the ground. From the roof, I could see the entire scene. I also had cell service and a clear escape route into the forest if needed. I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Jake Morrison at 1247 Mountain View Road. There are armed men on my property making threats. I need immediate assistance. Sir, we show Deputy Morrison is already at your location responding to a call. Deputy Morrison is part of the problem. These people are trying to steal my property. I have evidence of fraud and criminal conspiracy. There was a pause. Sir, I'm going to need you to explain. Just send backup. Real backup. And contact the FBI. This involves interstate fraud. From the roof, I could hear Karen getting increasingly agitated. He's not answering because he's not here, she told Deputy Morrison. He probably ran. We should search the property. Ma'am, I can't just search someone's home without. You have a welfare check request. That gives you the right to enter. I watched Deputy Morrison hesitate. Either he was genuinely conflicted about the legality, or he was a better actor than I expected. That's when I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, sirens. Multiple sirens, getting closer. Karen heard them too. What the hell is that? Tom was already moving toward the SUV. We need to leave. Now. We're not leaving without that phone, Karen snapped. Karen, there are 3 police cars coming up the mountain. Whatever game you're playing is over. The first state police car crested the hill, followed by 2 more. But the vehicle that made me smile was the unmarked sedan behind them, FBI. From my perch on the roof, I watched Karen's empire begin to crumble. So the FBI had just arrived at my cabin where Karen and her crew were trying to intimidate me into silence. From my hiding spot on the roof, I was about to witness the most satisfying takedown of my life. But Karen wasn't going down without a fight, and her final desperate move would expose just how deep this conspiracy really went. Agent Sarah Chun, no relation to fake Tom Chun, stepped out of the unmarked sedan like she owned the place. She was about 40, built like someone who could handle herself, and wearing an expression that said she'd dealt with plenty of Karen's type before. Deputy Morrison, step away from the residence. Deputy Morrison looked confused. Agent Chun, what's going on here? We received reports of fraud, conspiracy, and now harassment. Everyone needs to back away from the building immediately. Karen tried her sweet voice routine. Officer, there's been a misunderstanding. We're just community leaders trying to resolve a property dispute. Agent Chin looked at Karen like she was something stuck to her shoe. Ma'am, are you Karen Whitfield of Mountain Land Management? I am, and I resent the implication. You're under investigation for conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery of federal documents, and interstate racketeering. I suggest you remain silent and contact an attorney. From the roof, I watched Karen's face cycle through shock, anger, and then pure rage. This is ridiculous. We're trying to help this community. By forging EPA documents and Forest Service condemnation orders, Tom, or whoever he really was already backing toward the SUV. Karen, we need to leave. Now. But Agent Chun had anticipated that. 2 more FBI vehicles came around the bend, blocking all the exits. Nobody's leaving until we sort this out. That's when I decided to make my grand entrance. I slid down from the roof and dropped into my backyard, then walked around to the front of the cabin with my phone still recording. Agent Chun, I'm Jake Morrison. I'm the one who called this in. Agent Chun looked relieved to see me alive. Mr. Morrison, are you injured? We received reports that you were being threatened. I'm fine, but I have evidence you need to see. I pulled out my phone and the copies of the forged documents. I recorded their entire confession about the lithium mining operation. Karen exploded. That recording is illegal. He was secretly recording a private meeting. Actually, Colorado is a one-party consent state, Agent Chin said calmly. Mr. Morrison had every right to record conversations he was part of. I handed over my phone and the documents. The recording starts at 2:47. That's where Karen admits this was never about conservation. It was about accessing lithium deposits worth hundreds of millions. Agent Chin scrolled through the evidence while her team positioned themselves around Karen's group. Mr. Morrison, how did you know to contact the FBI? My lawyer Marcus Rodriguez suggested it. But honestly, I didn't realize how big this was until they started bringing armed men to my property. Armed men. Agent Chen looked at the two guys from the SUV, who suddenly looked very uncomfortable. Deputy Morrison stepped forward. Agent Chen, I should clarify my role here. I received a call about erratic behavior and possible threats, but I was starting to question the validity of the complaint. Deputy, we'll need a full statement from you. But right now, I'm more interested in these gentlemen. She nodded toward the SUV guys. Identification, please. The taller one reluctantly pulled out his wallet. Vincent Torres, private security. Licensed. In Nevada. This is Colorado. You have no authority here. Agent Chun turned to her team. Detain Mr. Torres and his associate for questioning. That's when Karen completely lost it. This is insane. We're legitimate business people. We have investors. We have contracts. With whom? Agent Chen asked. Apex Mining Consortium out of Nevada. They've invested $40 million in this project. I watched Agent Chen's expression change. She knew that name. Ma'am, Apex Mining Consortium is under federal investigation for illegal mining operations on federal land. If you're associated with them, you're in much deeper trouble than simple fraud. Karen's face went white. What? No, that's impossible. Tom, tell her. But Tom was done playing along. Karen, I told you from the beginning this was too risky. I told you we should have just made legitimate offers. Tom, shut up. My name isn't Tom Chun. It's Thomas Brennan, and I'm an attorney with Apex Mining. Agent Chun, I'd like to discuss cooperation in exchange for immunity. The betrayal hit Karen like a physical blow. You son of a bitch. This was your idea. Actually, it was yours. I have the emails to prove it. Agent Chun was taking notes. Mr. Brennan, you'll need to speak with our attorneys about any cooperation agreement. But first, I need to understand the scope of this operation. It's not just Jake's property, Thomas admitted. There are 17 properties in this valley that Apex wants for the mining operation. Karen's been running similar scams on other landowners for the past 2 years. My blood ran cold. Other people are going through this. The Hendersons lost their ranch last year to a fake Forest Service easement. The Kowalski family, no relation to Brad here, lost their cabin to fraudulent tax liens. Karen's been systematically targeting anyone who owns property over the mineral deposits. Agent Chin called for additional units. This is now a multi-victim fraud case. Mr. Morrison, you may have saved more than just your own property. Karen made one last desperate play. Jake, listen to me. You still don't understand what you're dealing with. Apex has connections you can't imagine. Federal judges, senators, people who can make your life very difficult. Take the money and walk away. Are you threatening a federal witness? Agent Chen asked. I'm trying to save his life. You think this ends with my arrest? Apex has invested too much money to let one stubborn mountain man destroy everything. Ma'am, you're making this much worse for yourself. But Karen was beyond caring. Worse? You want to know worse? Check the bank records. Check who's been financing the Pine Ridge HOA expansion. Check who's been paying for the new community center, the road improvements, all of it. Agent Chen looked intrigued. What are you saying? I'm saying half this town is on Apex's payroll, whether they know it or not. The HOA board, the county assessor, 3 members of the town council. We've been buying influence for 2 years. Brad Kowalski, who'd been silent through most of this, suddenly found his voice. Karen, what the hell are you talking about? I was never on anyone's payroll. Really, Brad? Who do you think paid for your wife's medical bills when she had cancer? That anonymous benefactor who covered the $200,000 you couldn't afford? That was Apex money, funneled through the Community Assistance Fund. Brad's face crumbled. You're lying. Check your bank records. The Community Assistance Fund is an Apex shell company. They've been buying loyalty by helping people in crisis, then calling in favors when they need them. Agent Chen was furiously taking notes. Mr. Kowalski, we'll need to speak with you about any requests for favors or assistance you may have received. I never knew. When they asked me to help pressure Jake, I thought it was just HOA business. They said it was about community standards. What exactly did they ask you to do? File noise complaints, report code violations, anything to make him want to sell. But I swear, I didn't know about the mining or the fraud. Karen laughed bitterly. None of you knew. That was the point. Apex doesn't want partners, they want puppets. More FBI vehicles were arriving, along with state police and what looked like forensic accountants. Agent Chin's phone was ringing constantly. Mr. Morrison, she said during a brief lull. I need you to understand that you're now a key witness in what appears to be a major federal case. We'll need extensive statements, and you may be asked to testify. Whatever it takes. But what about my property? What about the court hearing tomorrow? The hearing will be postponed pending our investigation. And your property is safe. Those condemnation orders are obviously fraudulent. Thomas Brennan, still trying to negotiate his cooperation deal, spoke up again. Agent Chun, there's something else. The lithium deposits aren't just under Jake's property. The geological surveys show a vein that runs under most of the Pine Ridge development. What does that mean? I asked. It means Apex's long-term plan was to condemn the entire community once they had control of the mineral rights. Everyone would have lost their homes eventually. The magnitude of it hit me. This wasn't just about my grandfather's cabin. It was about destroying an entire mountain community for corporate profit. As they loaded Karen into the FBI vehicle, she made one final attempt to get under my skin. You think you've won, Jake? This is just the beginning. Apex has lawyers who will tie this up in court for decades. You'll spend every penny you have fighting them. Maybe, I said. But my grandfather taught me that some fights are worth having, even if you can't win them. Your grandfather was a fool who died alone in these mountains. That crossed a line. My grandfather was a man who stood up to bullies. Something you clearly never learned how to deal with. Agent Chin intervened. That's enough. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. As the FBI vehicles pulled away with Karen, Thomas, and the security guys, I stood in my driveway trying to process what had just happened. Deputy Morrison approached me apologetically. Jake, I owe you an apology. I should have questioned that complaint more carefully. You were doing your job. But maybe next time, consider the source. Definitely. For what it's worth, I'm glad you didn't back down. Agent Chun was the last to leave. Mr. Morrison, we'll be in touch within 48 hours to schedule your formal statement. In the meantime, I'd suggest staying alert. Even with the main players in custody, Apex still has resources. Are you saying I'm in danger? I'm saying you've cost some very wealthy people a lot of money. Be careful. The FBI had just arrested Karen and her crew, exposing a massive conspiracy that went far beyond my little cabin. But Agent Chin's warning about Apex Mining still having resources was about to prove prophetic. Because while we'd caught the local players, the real power behind this scheme was just getting started, and my grandfather had left me one final secret that would change everything. If you've been following this story, drop a comment about the biggest plot twist you didn't see coming. Because what I found in my grandfather's workshop would blow this case wide open. The next morning, I woke up to the strangest sound I'd heard in months. Absolute silence. No Karen banging on my door, no HOA violations being slipped under my windshield wipers, no mysterious vehicles cruising past my property. For the first time since this whole mess started, I actually felt like I could breathe. I was making coffee when my phone rang. Marcus Rodriguez, my lawyer. Jake, I've got good news and potentially concerning news. Hit me with the good news first. The court hearing has been officially postponed indefinitely pending the FBI investigation. All the fraudulent documents have been withdrawn, and the county has issued a formal apology for any inconvenience. That's great. What's the concerning news? Apex Mining filed a federal lawsuit yesterday, claiming you've damaged their legitimate business interests through false accusations. They're seeking $50 million in damages. I nearly dropped my coffee. $50 million? For what? They're claiming you've defamed their company and interfered with lawful business contracts. It's obviously a SLAPP suit designed to intimidate you, but they have the resources to make your life very expensive. Can they do that? Even with their people in federal custody? Unfortunately, yes. Karen and Thomas were independent contractors according to Apex's legal filings. They're claiming they had no knowledge of any illegal activities. I felt that familiar knot forming in my stomach. So we're back to square one. Not exactly. Agent Chin called me this morning. The FBI is treating this as witness intimidation, and they're fast-tracking their investigation. But Jake, there's something else. She wants to meet with you this afternoon. She said you might have evidence you don't even know about. Agent Chin arrived at 2 p.m. with a forensic accountant and someone she introduced as a geological expert from the Department of Interior. Mr. Morrison, we've been analyzing the documents you provided, and we've uncovered something interesting. The geological surveys that Apex used to identify the lithium deposits, they're dated 3 years ago. But according to our records, no legitimate geological surveys were conducted in this area during that time frame. What does that mean? It means someone provided Apex with geological data they shouldn't have had access to. Data that would have required extensive ground surveys, core samples, and mineral analysis. The geological expert, Dr. Sarah Kim, stepped forward. Mr. Morrison, we understand your grandfather worked for the Forest Service for over 30 years. Did he ever mention conducting mineral surveys in this area? Not specifically, but he was always taking soil samples and marking things on maps. I figured it was just part of his job. Could we see his workspace? Any records he might have kept? I led them to my grandfather's workshop, a converted shed behind the cabin that I'd barely touched since he died. It was exactly as he'd left it. Meticulously organized tools, filing cabinets full of Forest Service paperwork, and his old surveying equipment. Dr. Kim went straight to the filing cabinets. Mr. Morrison, your grandfather was more than just a forest ranger. According to his personnel file, he was a certified geological surveyor. He conducted mineral assessments for the Forest Service from 1985 to 2018. She pulled out a thick folder labeled Pine Ridge Geological Assessment, Confidential. This is it. This is the source data Apex has been using. Agent Chun examined the documents. These surveys show lithium deposits worth potentially $800 million. But they're marked as classified Forest Service documents. How would Apex have gotten access to classified federal documents? I asked. That's what we're going to find out. But first, there's something else in here. Dr. Kim had found another folder, this one labeled Personal Notes, JM Eyes Only. Inside were handwritten notes in my grandfather's careful script, documenting suspicious activities he'd observed over his final years of service. March 15, 2018. Unauthorized vehicle spotted near Survey Point 7. Nevada plates. Occupants appeared to be taking soil samples. April 3, 2018. Requested information about who has access to geological survey data. Supervisor seemed evasive. June 12, 2018. Overheard phone conversation about Pine Ridge opportunity. Need to investigate further. August 20th, 2018. Someone broke into my office. Nothing appeared missing, but files had been disturbed. Installing hidden camera. Agent Chin looked up sharply. Hidden camera? My grandfather had always been thorough, but I never realized how thorough until we found the small digital camera hidden in a fake smoke detector in his workshop. Dr. Kim connected it to her laptop, and we watched 3 years of time-lapse footage of people coming and going from the workshop. Most of it was just my grandfather working, but there were several instances of people entering when he wasn't there. There, Agent Chun pointed at the screen. August 23, 2018. We watched a man in a Forest Service uniform enter the workshop with a key, go straight to the filing cabinets, and photograph documents with his phone. Can you enhance that image? Dr. Kim worked her technical magic, and the man's face became clear. That's Deputy Forest Service Supervisor Michael Hendricks, Agent Chun said grimly. He's been under investigation for corruption, but we didn't have proof until now. But the real bombshell came from footage dated September 15, 2018. We watched Karen Whitfield herself enter the workshop, also with a key, and spend over an hour photographing documents. How did she get a key? I asked. Agent Chin paused the video and zoomed in on Karen's hand. She was wearing what looked like a Forest Service ID badge. We need to run facial recognition on everyone who appears in this footage. Your grandfather may have documented the entire conspiracy without realizing it. The final piece of evidence was a handwritten note dated just 2 weeks before my grandfather's death. They know I know. Truck tampering incident yesterday was no accident. If something happens to me, Jake needs to see the workshop footage. The corruption goes all the way to Washington. Trust no one in the local Forest Service office. My hands were shaking as I read it. You think they killed him? Your grandfather died in a vehicle accident, correct? Yeah. His truck went off the mountain road during a snowstorm. Agent Chun and Dr. Kim exchanged glances. Mr. Morrison, we're going to need to request an investigation into your grandfather's death. This note suggests he believed his vehicle had been tampered with. Over the next hour, we went through every frame of footage and every document in my grandfather's files. The picture that emerged was staggering. Apex Mining had been planning the Pine Ridge operation for over 5 years. They'd systematically corrupted Forest Service officials, local government employees, and community leaders. The geological data theft was just the beginning. Look at this. Dr. Kim had found a spreadsheet in my grandfather's files. He was tracking property sales in the area. Every piece of land that changed hands in the past 3 years was bought by shell companies connected to Apex. They've been slowly acquiring the entire valley, Agent Chen realized. Your property was one of the last holdouts. But the most damning evidence was a recorded phone conversation my grandfather had saved on an old digital recorder. We listened to Karen's voice. Michael, we need those geological surveys now. Apex is getting impatient, and if we don't deliver the data, they'll find someone who will. A man's voice responded. Karen, this is federal property. If we get caught, we won't get caught if you do your job. Besides, Morrison's getting suspicious. We might need to accelerate the timeline. What does that mean? It means the old man might have an accident. Mountain roads can be very dangerous in winter. The recording was dated 3 days before my grandfather's death. Agent Chen immediately called for additional units. We're treating this as a potential homicide now. I need the state police to reopen the investigation into James Morrison's death, and I want Michael Hendricks in custody within the hour. My phone was ringing constantly. Reporters who'd somehow gotten wind of the story, neighbors wanting to know what was happening, and Marcus calling with updates on the legal situation. Jake, you need to see the news, Marcus said. This story has gone national. I turned on the TV to see a CNN reporter standing outside the Pine Ridge Community Center. What started as a property dispute in rural Colorado has exploded into a federal investigation involving mining fraud, government corruption, and possibly murder. The FBI has arrested multiple suspects in what they're calling one of the largest mining fraud schemes in recent history. The reporter continued, at the center of it all is Jake Morrison, a wildlife photographer who refused to sell his grandfather's cabin and uncovered a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of the Forest Service and involves hundreds of millions of dollars in illegal mining operations. This is insane, I muttered. Agent Chen overheard me. Mr. Morrison, I need you to understand that you're about to become a very public figure. This case is going to make national headlines, and Apex is going to throw everything they have at discrediting you. What should I do? Tell the truth. Keep telling the truth. And trust that the system will work. 2 hours later, Agent Chun got the call she'd been waiting for. Michael Hendricks had been arrested at Denver International Airport trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands with $2.3 million in cash. But the real victory came when her phone rang again. Agent Chun, this is Director Walsh from the Denver field office. We just executed search warrants on Apex Mining's corporate headquarters. You're not going to believe what we found. She put the call on speaker. Apex has been running similar operations in 6 states. We're looking at over 200 victims and potentially billions in fraud. Your Pine Ridge case just became the cornerstone of a massive RICO prosecution. What about the lawsuit against Mr. Morrison? Withdrawn as of an hour ago. Apex's attorneys are too busy trying to keep their executives out of federal prison. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. Agent Chun, Director Walsh continued. Tell Mr. Morrison that his grandfather would be proud. The evidence he preserved is going to put these people away for a very long time. I'm sitting on my grandfather's porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains, and thinking about how much has changed. Karen Whitfield was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering. Thomas Brennan got 7 years after cooperating with prosecutors. Michael Hendricks got 25 years for corruption, conspiracy, and second-degree murder. Yes, they proved he tampered with my grandfather's truck. The Pine Ridge community is slowly healing. Brad Kowalski and several other neighbors who were unknowingly caught up in Apex's scheme have become good friends. We started a legitimate community association focused on conservation and supporting local families. The best part? The federal government designated the entire Pine Ridge Valley as a protected geological area. No mining, no development, just the mountains the way my grandfather wanted them preserved. I still live in the cabin, but I've made some improvements. Solar panels, a new roof, and a workshop where I'm learning to use my grandfather's old surveying equipment. Oh, and I'm not alone anymore. Dr. Sarah Kim and I have been dating for 3 months. Turns out she loves the mountains as much as I do. And she's teaching me more about geology than I ever thought I wanted to know. The lawsuit money. Yes, there was lawsuit money, A wrongful death settlement from Apex's bankruptcy proceedings is funding a scholarship program for rural kids who want to study environmental science. Sometimes I sit in my grandfather's workshop and read his notes, and I swear I can feel him smiling. He spent 30 years protecting these mountains, and in the end, his careful documentation saved not just our family land, but an entire community. Karen was wrong about one thing. My grandfather didn't die alone in these mountains. He died protecting them, surrounded by everything he loved, and his legacy lives on in every sunrise over Pine Ridge. If there's one thing I learned from this whole experience, it's that sometimes the fight chooses you. I never wanted to be the guy who took on a mining corporation and exposed federal corruption. I just wanted to honor my grandfather's memory and keep his cabin. But when bullies come for what matters most to you, you have two choices: stand up or step aside. My grandfather taught me that some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible. The mountains are still here. The cabin is still here. And every morning when I wake up to that view, I remember that the best victories aren't about beating the other guy. They're about protecting what you love. Thanks for following this crazy journey with me. Drop a comment if you've ever had to stand up to someone who seemed too powerful to fight. Sometimes the little guy wins, and sometimes justice actually works. And remember, never underestimate what one person with the truth can accomplish. Final stats: Karen Whitfield, 15 years federal prison. Apex Mining Corporation, dissolved, $2.8 billion in fines and restitution. Pine Ridge Valley, protected forever. One stubborn mountain man, still stubborn, still on the mountain.